very excited to welcome my mother to the podcast, reluctantly joining us today for a conversation. I've had to promise her that I will try to keep the questions about her personally to a minimum, but we'll get her valuable insights and expertise on education and how she approached it as a parent. Because as her daughter, I can tell you she had a very unique and powerful way of helping us kids understand what education and the role of education was in our lives and pursue higher education in a way that was authentic and true to who we were, as opposed to just searching for a job and the best job. But I do see, for those of you watching on the YouTube channel, I did not quite notice how much taller I was than my mother until I sat directly next to her to do this podcast. Or I'll slouch a bit, you sit up a bit, and we'll find somewhere in the middle. No. So how uncomfortable are you right now on a scale of 1 to 10?
10.
Okay, so we're talking about something very valuable, which is pushing yourself outside your comfort zone, right? Big part of what education is all meant to do. Why don't you start with sharing us a little bit? You know, we've all loved, your children have loved hearing the stories of your own educational experience as a child, growing up in, would it be fair to say, rural Saskatchewan?
Correct.
And what did school look like for you? Let's say elementary. So really young. When did you first go to school? Did you start school when you were 4 or 5, like kids do now?
Not until you were grade 1.
And so
then we were in a farm, so we had to go for about 10 miles, or no, a mile and a half to get the bus. And then you would go into high school, but for junior school and elementary, you went with a horse and carriage. And I'm from Unalert. And to go, and it was about 10 miles that we had to go to school. And it was one building for every grade until I believe it was grade 6. And then we had to go to another school.
And when you traveled to and from school with, I believe Bessie was the horse's name?
Correct.
I just think that's the most adorable thing. Would you go? No parents went with you. You went with you just went with your brothers and sisters?
Yes, there's 4 of us. My younger sister, she didn't go to that school because by the time we all left there, she went to the other school, which was much easier on a bus.
Get to.
Yeah.
So this first school that the majority of your siblings went to, what did it look like? Like, did it look like a school that we would identify it as today, or was it more of this quote unquote like schoolhouse?
It's more like a schoolhouse. It was a big build. It was a building, no divisions. Everybody was just in rows, and one row would be grade 1, grade 2, grade 3. And then there was one teacher. And then the grade 6s, I think it was grade 6, would help teach the kindergarten. And you would take on just roles like that. My oldest sister, when she was there, she would have to take the horse and harness it in the barn behind the school. And it was just a big building. Not that big, actually.
How did the teacher teach in the same room? Would she talk to one row and say, okay, kindergartners in row 1 or grade 6s in row 6, and then she'd give them an activity and then she'd go to the next row? Or
I can't remember exactly anymore, but she would start out by talking to everybody, and then she'd give each person would get everybody would get math, everybody would get reading, so then each one would get their schedule, and then you would do what you're supposed to do, and then the older grades help the younger grades because she couldn't manage everybody.
Well, this is
I think it was a man.
In the school systems today, in the Toronto District School Board and a lot of other school boards around Canada, now they have a lot of split classes. Have you heard of these?
Yes.
Yeah. So grade 1s and 2s are in the same class, or grade 3s and 4s are in the same class. And instructors are having to do the same thing where they're like, okay, it's math, but then the grade 3s, we're going to get you to do this. The grade 4s, we're going to get you to do this. I don't know how much mentoring happens though. Like how much of this, the older grade helping or teaching the younger grade. Were there ever, did you remember when you were in grade 6 and you were helping the younger grade?
I'm too old to remember that.
Because
I honest to goodness don't remember actually doing, but that's what we all had. And some kids I remember were better at it, because when I was younger, there was somebody would help me. And some of the older kids would be better than others doing it. You'd have born teachers or born, type thing.
Yeah.
Some are better than others. And if you got a guy at that age, that's 70 years ago.
Yeah.
So it's different now.
It's an interesting thing that I don't think we put that on our younger students, but mentorship and this idea of older teaching younger is a really key element that I think is going to be in the future of education. Again, one, because of the scale, like there's so many students and students with different needs, and there's not enough staff, and in different classrooms there's opportunities for peer-to-peer.
But doesn't that happen in university now? You get the people that are in higher levels, they tutor the first year and second year.
Very interesting. No, so I think you're referring to TAs. I think you're talking about TAs. Well, PhDs.
No, this isn't teachers' assistants. No, these are children. These were young people that would do teaching, like what's the word I'm looking for?
Sure, if they're studying to be teachers.
No, they would. It was like a moneymaker. Like you're earning money, you would say, I'll help you. And then the parents would give them.
Oh, so tutors.
Yeah. Tutoring. So that's like.
Yeah, but that's being paid as opposed to saying this is part of education.
Yes. No, I'm
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Most of them are being paid.
Yeah. Like peer tutors exist. Absolutely. And someone who's really good in math, you could hire a peer tutor and they would teach you in math. But the TA system, which is actually very fascinating and desperate need of restructuring, is that older students or students who are looking at TA-ships, they get paid.
Yeah.
And they go and they lead tutorials and they lead like those little study sessions for
like
students. Mini teachers, but they are not trained teachers in any way. And often they're actually not even in the discipline or the subject matter that they're teaching.
Oh, okay.
So it's basically just all hands on deck, getting some help to invigilate tutorials, mark assignments. Yeah. But often those peer experiences are not, like I say, experts in either the field or in teaching. So this idea of leveraging human resources that already exist in a world of education where there's like so few teachers and there's so much burnout, I think it's going to look different, and it's going to evolve as the world continues.
Yeah. You got to do what you got to do at the time.
And then what was the role of play when you went to school? Like, this happens a lot when I talk to people who have been in different countries and gone to school, or have gone to school a little bit longer ago, that this notion of nowadays, we talk about this value of creativity and art and play. And what do you remember about that in your early education? Like, was it something that was emphasized, or did you have art class? Did you have exercise? Like, did you have like go outside and play time?
Well, playtime was you'd go out in the backyard, and in the wintertime you'd make snowmen, and in the summertime, I guess you would you just play. I don't remember having a whole lot of equipment. You would just go out and use your imagination or do something with, sticks and stuff like that, instead of bats, I guess. But it was backyard. I don't remember having art in class. It was all just, like math, reading, history, that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember having art at all.
And having that be an emphasis. Yeah.
No.
And creativity and exploration. No. And what do you think when you think of now that we think we emphasize that so much? Do you think it's a good thing? Do you think that there's, value in, especially with younger kids in elementary school, but not even, we tend to talk most about it with elementary school kids, but what about adults? Like, what about high school students? Like, what do you feel art or creativity or this kind of practice might offer students in terms of incorporating that more into their education? Because we certainly talk about it more now than we did when you were going to school.
Yeah. When I went to school, it was you had to go to school until grade 12 and then get out and work.
Yeah.
Yeah. On the farm or wherever. But imagination is what is amazing and is a necessity as you grow older. In any field you take, you got to be able to imagine what might happen, what might not, this sort of thing, using that skill. Uh, so I think it's a necessity for the younger grades. The older grades, there are people that just are not artistic at all. So most of it is now an elective, which I think is the way to go for older students. There's other things that some people can do. Like if you gave me woodwork, I would have failed hands down.
Sure.
But if you give me even, sewing or some cooking or something like that, I could have been okay. But so the elective field is good now.
Well, and what you're saying is important. Like you can have imagination in a variety of fields. Like
yes,
imagination just doesn't have to be like, I can't play an instrument to save my life. I can't draw to save my life, but I like doing collages, or I think that educational design and instructional design is a very creative process. Even when using words or doing crosswords, like thinking, allowing your brain space, so that I'm sure in some definition of imagination out there in the internet, there's a definition of allowing your brain to wander, to think, to conceive, get curious about things. And you can do that in the sciences. You could do that, in a fine arts class.
Yeah. A lot different now with the internet and using the computer, but before, when a person like you had classmates that were into design, fashion design, and that sort of thing, well, then the elective that they had going for them was sewing. And then I'm not sure, did you have an elective for internet stuff?
We had a computer class.
Oh, so you had
we had one computer class where you would go to a computer lab and you would have access to computers. Yeah. And this was in the late 90s, everybody.
Yeah, mine's 70 years ago.
Yeah. Do you think computers, just on that note, what do you think about technology in terms of supporting creativity or destroying creativity? Because there's this idea of imagination.
What sort of support? Financial or government support? Or
no, do you think technology and the way technology exists and the fact that people have devices or iPads or use their laptops or, do you think that the addition of technology into our world is helping us be more creative, less creative? As a species, maybe.
I think it's most likely helping them to be more creative because you can do so much with the internet. But I think it's detrimental in learning how to write, read, math, because you just go, your spelling, we used to have to do all that in our heads and practice and look up. Now you go to a computer, all you do is get the computer to say spell check. It's all checked. You get some information for a project that you have at school. You can Google and you got all that stuff before like I remember when you were going to school, I got all the National Geographics and all this sort of stuff. And you had to look through things. You had to go to the library. Now you Google and you got your information, which I think is detrimental.
It's interesting, this idea of process, right? The process looks very different.
Yeah.
I remember like Encyclopedia Britannicas and having to look up the Encyclopedia Britannicas. The National Geographics were huge. You'd go and look at all the spines of the National Geographics because the topics that were explored in that issue were written on the side. And was it relevant to the project that I was completing?
And you could cut pictures out to go with your project instead of, the computer. You print it and there you go. You don't have to really look for it.
And I also remember fighting with my siblings over who had cut the pictures out of the National Geographic that I wanted for my project that happened the next year. And it's interesting, right? Because this idea of process and the skills, there were things that we used to do when we went to school in terms of, okay, I did a research project. I had to go to National Geographics. I had to go to multiple different sources. And then I had cut out pictures and I would assemble a poster board or something. Whereas now a student is given that task where they're given a topic and asked to go do something. And to your point, there's a speed thing. Like now they have the speed of the internet and computers to go and get that information. And in education, one of the things we're struggling with is how do you still emphasize those other components of the process, like making sure the sources the sites you're sourcing information from are valid and relevant. But the big thing now, as you may have been reading about, right, is the words, generating the words.
Yeah.
So like the research side of things is different, but also I would have to write the words to describe my project. Whereas now artificial intelligence machines are starting
Yeah.
to do some of that work
And
for
there
us.
goes your imagination too. You read it, look up a paper by someone. It's their imagination and their skill of thinking up things to write a paper, but you get all the ideas that that man or woman has thought of, and you use their material to
Yeah.
add to your essay, which should be what you came up with.
But don't you feel like even in your day, people could cheat on an essay? Like
Oh,
I could,
anybody can cheat.
yeah, like people are so worried about people
Differently
cheating. It's just so much faster
and
now
easier.
and easier to cheat. But ultimately, people could have, you could have had
Sure.
someone write your essay. I could have plagiarized, like taken words off people. Now I'm just using this machine.
Yeah, it was more like look over the guy's shoulder or girl's shoulder. What'd she write? Or sharing, yeah, that sort of thing, which now you're just sharing it and looking over the shoulder of a computer.
Yeah. So I think it's like you said, it's always existed, but it's an interesting, it's an interesting concept now. The At this point, like when I went through elementary and the secondary school, there was a very clear message that went through our house, which speaks a little bit to how you're describing your educational experience in this schoolhouse, which was education is your job.
Yes.
So this is something that both of my parents were very consistent with. And what did you mean when you said that to us when we were kids? Like, what does that sentence mean to you?
Well, it's taking on it's like taking on a project. You work on the project till it's done, and it's your responsibility. You're going to school. It's your job to go to school, listen to the teacher, learn what they're saying. It's not my job to be on your back to say da da da. Do this, do that. It's your job to go like any other. If I went to work, it's my responsible to do what I'm supposed to do it well, finish it, and then come home and carry on. But so that was your job. You didn't have to go out and deliver papers. You didn't have to go to the job and become a doctor or all that sort of thing. Your job was school, to be educated.
And what was the outcome that you were? What is the outcome of school? When you say that, like education is your job, jobs give you money, right?
Yeah.
Like you go to the job, you get money to pay for your life. What was education in your mind when you were emphasizing that so strongly to us? Education was for what? Like what was the purpose?
You go to school.
Yeah.
Your reward is you're educated. So, it's the same as you go to work, you get money. You go to school, you get educated. And then when you're finished that part of your job, grade 1 to grade 12, you go and that education takes you to the next level. If you don't get that education and finish that job, you're way behind anybody else, or you want to go do whatever, like a techie person or a doctor or a nurse or educate, anything like that. If you haven't learned that I need to do a job, finish it, and I'm educated now, and take a step further.
So for you, it was equally important the skills associated with taking ownership, being responsible, being accountable, as it was the fact that we were learning math.
Yes. And to complete a job, when you got a job completed.
And the output of that completion was not necessarily us getting a job, was us being educated.
Yes.
Is that because you grew up and there you could see people who were not educated? Like, did you have some idea of what it meant to be uneducated, and that being uneducated was a real disadvantage?
I don't know that I really thought of it that way. It's just something my mom and dad instilled in us, that education was important for you to get to do and to accomplish anything in your later life. And so it was up to you to go get educated. Not that, I guess it was out of respect for my parents. This was something they really wanted us to do and to accomplish. So you did it.
So it's that value. There's this high value placed on it. And then you place that high value.
I continued
on us.
Like it or not.
I still, obviously it's my job now. So I do still really think education is important in a lot of ways. But I just want to touch on the skills thing for a second, because I'll tell you right now, Mom, in the world of higher education, we are trying so hard to get students to better manage their time, take responsibility for their learning, take ownership of the learning process, to make informed decisions. And this is one of the main, there's another one about higher education, a big nugget I'll tell you later, but one of the main reasons I wanted to have you share on this podcast was I think the manner in which you parented us through school is very unique and not something that happens now in the same way. That's just part one of this exciting conversation, my friends. Click on part two and continue with us on this important journey we like to call the education revolution.